Welcome, my name is Erica. I'm a co-founder of 33 Sport Nutrition, and today on the show I have with me Charlie Webster. She is an athlete, but she is also a Sky Sport presenter. In 2016, she challenged herself to cycle 3,000 miles from London to Rio, and she arrives just for the opening of the Olympics. She achieved this immense challenge, but she found herself on life support just 48 hours after arriving in Rio. She contracted a rare form of malaria while traveling. Since then, she became a vocal advocate for malaria treatment and prevention. She is sharing with us so many insights and so many thoughts that they can become tools, all tools that can be actually used from anyone to overcome difficulties in life. Sharing tools and making an all-natural sport nutrition is our mission. You can find us at 33shake.com. Let's go into the conversation with Charlie Webster. Charlie, it's such a pleasure to have you here at the show. So I just wanted to know more about you and about your incredible story. So in 2016, you have contracted malaria during a 5-week bike ride. If I'm not wrong, you did 3,000 miles from London to Rio de Janeiro. So tell us more about it.
Gosh, it's such a long story. Sometimes I don't even know where to start. And every time I tell the story, I think I start in a different place. So I cycled 3,000 miles, as you just said, Erica, and it lasted. It was about 5 weeks. We did it in just under 5 weeks and did it for charity. And we set off from London and then cycled all the way through Europe, because everybody's always like, well, how do you kind of get there? And then we cycled all the way down South America, and mainly down Brazil. And then I arrived in Rio, and I was meant to be broadcasting on the Olympic Games. And the great thing was, it was like, wow, doing this for charity. I'm cycling from London, from the 2012 Olympic Stadium to the next Olympics. And I worked on the 2012 Olympics, and then was meant to be working on the 2016 Olympics in Rio. And then arrived in Rio and I just didn't feel very well, but I was fine, like the whole bike ride, apart from obviously being tired. And the mental journey, I think, for me was the hardest on something like that. And I always think it is, people look at the physical side of things and people ask, what was the worst thing? Was it your legs? Was it sitting on a bike for that long? Was it how sore your bits and your bum was? And it's like, well, yes, but no, it's the mental battle of having to get up every single morning and getting back on a bike again. And also the monotony, even though we were cycling through like amazing landscapes, the monotony of, pedal down, pedal up, pedal down, and just hours and hours of road was really hard. And also, I don't think, me and the support crew and the group, we weren't massively tight. They weren't like people I really knew. So that was, I think, quite hard to show when you were struggling or show your emotions. But then when I arrived in Rio, I just didn't feel right. And I think I'm a very intuitive person, and I'm not somebody that's ever really ill. So I was just like, okay, what's going on? I don't feel well in myself. I don't feel right. And I didn't feel like, oh my God, I've just cycled 3,000 miles. Oh, this is amazing. I just didn't feel right and didn't have that elation of what I'd just done, and just felt absolutely drained emotionally and physically. But I put it down to the fact that I cycled 3,000 miles, which I think anybody would, right?
Absolutely.
So I cycled to the top of the Christ Redeemer, which was our 3,000th mile. So that was the finish line of Ride to Rio. And there was four of us that completed the whole way. No, I think there was 3 of us that did the whole thing. And then another person, the 4th person, came in halfway through. And we got to the top of Christ Redeemer, absolutely stunning. I'd always wanted to go there. I looked up at the massive figure of Christ and was like, thank you, God, for getting me here. And for a second I was like, wow, I've just survived that. I've done it. I've managed it. And it was this weird thing because, I was looking at the big Christ on the top of the mountain and thinking about my life and my journey and like being grateful and thankful. And then little did I know that 24 hours later, I'd be critically ill, and 48 hours later, I'd be on life support, dying. And it's so weird sometimes when I think about it like that. And I remember that moment so vividly. And I remember that the clouds covered Rio when you looked down, so you couldn't see Rio. And then all of a sudden they lifted and you could see the city below and how beautiful it was. And how many people were on top of this mountain, like taking photos. And there was these like Japanese crew that had come for the Olympics, and they were like asking for me to film and stuff. And it's probably because I was in cycling kit and I had flags all over me, and I had the Union Jack wrapped around me and the Brazilian flag. And then kind of it was all elation, but somewhere inside I just didn't feel right. And then we did all the press down at the Olympic Park. And then by the time I got to that evening, I was packing my bike up because, for those that don't cycle, you kind of have to pack it up and put it in a big bike bag. And it took me hours, and I kept being sick in between and having to run to the toilet. And it didn't feel well at all. And then by that night, I knew there was something really wrong, but I just kind of ignored it because I was working the next day and I wanted to be okay for my job. And for me, I hate letting people down. So sometimes it's a flaw of mine because I don't recognize when I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm too busy making sure that everybody else is okay. And it's a good thing, but also can be negative sometimes. And then I didn't want to let people down, so I struggled through. So I did one live take at basically where Scott Mills was DJing in the Olympic Stadium in London, and Gethin Jones, another host, was basically handing over to me because there was a big party in London. And then we were like, oh yeah, now let's hand it over to Rio where I am. So I was there, and I remember doing the live, and they put the camera on me. But the second before the camera was on me, I was like this with my head in my hands. And then as soon as like it was like, Charlie, you're live, I was like, oh, welcome to Rio, la 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 la. Like trying to do my job. And I was like, yeah, we're on Copacabana Beach, we've got this, this is the atmosphere, and chatting away. And then as soon as and I was like on the big screen in London, and obviously we were airing everywhere to the UK. And then as soon as, I wish people could have seen like a fly in the wall, because as soon as the camera moved off my face and it went off me, I literally just was like, oh, like this, and had to bend down and could hardly stand up, and had my head in my hands, and I had to run to the bathroom, and the bathrooms you had to pay. So the producer had got real, which is obviously the Brazilian currency, in his hand and in her hand, so she could basically keep giving me the money so I could keep going to the toilet, because I had such bad diarrhea and I kept being sick, and it was just like trying to battle through. And I think people only know the story of when I got hospitalized rather than the bit before, in a way. And then, to cut a long story short, because there's so much I could tell you, I ended up going to the Olympic Stadium for the opening ceremony that evening. And the producer did say to me, look, if you want to sit out and get well again for tomorrow and, have some rest, you don't have to come. We can, do it without you. And I was like insistent that I go to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. I was insistent that I work, and I was like, no, I'm fine. I must have just got a bug. I'll be fine. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. And then by the time I got to the Olympic Stadium, I literally couldn't move. And I tried so hard to get through, but I was in so much pain, and it was getting worse and worse. And I kind of like panicking internally, but didn't really want to tell anybody how bad I felt. And then went to the bathroom because, like, this is a bit awful, but people, I don't think will mind. It's honest. Like, I could feel like stuff down there, and so I went to the bathroom, and it took me ages to get to the bathroom, and I literally was crawling there and then got to the toilet, was sick everywhere, and I was basically bleeding down below out of my bum, and like quite bad. And then I started to bleed out of my mouth, and there was blood in my nose, and I was like, okay, there's something wrong. So then left the stadium, took myself back to where I was staying, and I still didn't even go and see a doctor. I just went and put myself to sleep to try and see if I could ride it out, and ended up being up all night, being sick, and it was getting worse, and the bleeding was getting worse, and little did I know that I was actually hemorrhaging. And then took myself off to hospital, and it was only about 3 streets from where I was staying, and it took me about 40 minutes to walk there, to walk 3 streets, because that's how little I could walk. Yeah, and then went into the hospital, and they didn't speak English. I speak Spanish, but not Portuguese, so I tried to speak Spanish to them. And then they made me sign something, and they immediately took $500 off my credit card before they would even see me.
Wow.
And which I think shows how lucky we are. In the UK, I think we moan a lot about the NHS, but the fact that anybody can walk in a hospital here and get help is not everywhere. And then I basically had to give them all my credit cards, and then a doctor saw me.
Wow, what an adventure. It's kind of
I'll
interesting.
let you ask me a question now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you were speaking also about trying to refuse to listen to your body in a way, you know, because you were just giving priority to your career and to what you were doing. So focus on that. So there was a kind of, listening the story, a kind of disconnection between your body and your mind. Do you think
100%.
so? Do you think so now has changed drastically the thing? Because of course you're not anymore. That you create probably that connection.
Yeah, I think it's really good that you said that, because I think I've been on this journey since what happened. Obviously I survived, and physically I went through absolute hell. I had multiple organ failure. I had respiratory failure. My heart stopped. When I came out of hospital, I had to learn how to walk again. I had so much damage. I couldn't use my left arm because I had so much nerve damage. And look at it now. My kidneys wouldn't work. I had all these things, but it was the mental battle and I've sat so many times and tried to figure out, I suppose, what happened and who I am. Because it did make me question that, because you're right. I really had an inability to, which is interesting because I've done exercise since I was a young child. I've done sport to a high level, all the way through my childhood. I did martial arts, I boxed, I ran for my county, I ran for the north of England as a teenager. I represented England indoors as a teenager. So you'd think that I'd have a really good connection with my body. But it was so good in a way, and I was so good at competition and pushing myself and striving for a goal that actually I cut off what I was actually feeling, because all I was obsessed with was achieving that goal. And I, in a way, believed that I could push my body to anything and I could do anything, which is a really positive thing, because I think that's how I've achieved a lot of stuff. But at the same time, it means that there's definitely been times where I haven't taken care of my soul and myself. And then with what happened with Rio was definitely that, because my alarm system didn't go, you need to go to hospital and look after yourself. My alarm system went, you can't let people down, you need to do your job, you need to fulfill this, you worked hard on these contracts, you've got 3 different contracts, you can't let people down. What are people going to think? And that's what my alarm system did. So it was more external than it was internal. And since I call it Rio, since Rio happened to me, that's what me and my family and friends always refer to it as, rather than when I nearly died or whatever. So excuse the reference, because it's not that poor city's fault what happened to me. But since then, that's been part of my journey, because I realized I'm not connected with how I feel a lot of the time. And I got PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, after, and went and worked as a clinical psychologist. And since I've been studying how trauma affects behavior, and also trauma in childhood, because like a lot of it links back to some things that happened when I was younger, which meant that I was an amazing survivor because I was so resilient. But in that, I was very disattached from how I felt actually inside, if that makes sense. So I've been on this journey to try and learn self-care, basically. And that's what it's taught me, because I think, and the more I speak to people about it and the more I speak on it, because I do some talks on it, the more I realize that majority of us are actually really terrible at self-care. And we also self-sabotage a lot. And I think I would push and push and push, and then I'd be ill, and then I just would make the same mistakes over and over again and just push and push and push. You know, even things like, I don't know, like 4 years ago, was it three or 4 years ago, I did a half Ironman. 4 weeks later, I did a full Ironman. Not one part of me thought, I was like, oh, I'll be fine. And I remember falling over in training after the half Ironman, because I went training 2 days after doing the half Ironman. You know, which some people might think, oh, well, that's fine. But I went training 2 days after and I fell over because I was so tired. Because I didn't just do half Ironman. I'd been pushing training. I'd been working ridiculous hours, you know, not getting enough sleep. And I fell over, like literally 3 miles into a run. And again, I was just like annoyed about it rather than listening to why I fell over, if that makes sense. So these are all the things I'm trying to learn at the moment. I mean, funnily enough, I just had a learning curve the last 5 days, which I think when we spoke the other day, I had my leg up and I was laid up because my leg was so swollen. So I went to have a tattoo. This is relevant, on Thursday. And I wanted a tattoo to mark what happened to me. And for anybody that hasn't seen it, it's on my Instagram page, just Charlie Webster. It's absolutely beautiful. I've spent 2 years designing it. It's a gorgeous angel, and she's like tipped with her head up because she's strong and empowered. She's not fallen, and she's like a protector and a savior. And it meant so much to me because I feel like I was saved. I feel like I survived for a reason. All the doctors said I shouldn't have survived. And, you know, we hear these stories, sometimes these like miracle stories, and I really do believe in miracles because, you know, the report of what happened to me and what the state my body was in, physically, I shouldn't be here. So I do believe there's so much more that we don't understand, whether it's through God or whether it's through our spirit, our mind, our soul, our determination, our resilience as human beings. So I wanted to have this big angel on my leg to basically remind me every day, you know, when I'm sometimes battling with things, what I've already survived, and to remind me what I've already come through and to keep on going. So it's like really emotional for me. And so I went to have the tattoo done, and instead of doing 2 hours, it's a 7-hour tattoo, so it took 7 hours. Instead of being like, oh, maybe I should do this in 2 sittings, I actually did it in 1 sitting. I lied there for 7 hours. I've got a high pain threshold. And so I just put up with the pain. And then I drove for 3 hours. And then the next morning, I basically went to meetings and went and recorded, went and did live radio. Then I got in the car and drove 5 hours to Leeds to support my brother. And I just didn't even think for a second that I might need to rest it. And just basically my leg swelled up. And then I was like, oh, damn, like, what am I going to learn? But I am getting much better at trying to do self-care because, like, I think sometimes and I think a lot of people, I don't know whether yourself, Erica, will relate to this, but I think sometimes when we do self-care, I beat myself up about it. I feel guilty about it. I feel like I should be doing something. I feel like I should be achieving. If I'm resting, I'm not very good at not doing anything. You know, I'm like, oh, I need to do something. I need to achieve. I need to do this. And then because I survived and because I nearly died, I feel even more pressure sometimes because I feel like I've got to make the most of everything I do and make the most of my life and give as much as I possibly can to everyone and try and help people through learning through my own story. So sometimes I think I have this like battle in my head where I've got this like pressure to push and to push and to make a difference and to achieve, but then this little voice in my head that's saying, come on, you've got to learn from these things as well, and you've got to care for yourself, because ultimately if you don't care for yourself, how can you care for everyone else?
Absolutely. And this is, you're absolutely right. But what is interesting that you decided to have a beautiful tattoo. By the way, I've seen it on your social media, on Instagram. It looks amazing. And it's interesting because I seen it and I was actually wanted to ask it to you, the representation and everything. But it's interesting because you design something to put on your leg, a beautiful image that it reminds you a connection between your mind and your body in a way. So you created already there a big link. And so it's kind of interesting to see how you create actually the connection. Just look your leg, and you might have to remind yourself to listen also to your body, not just to your mind. Because the struggle of the mind is so always, there is this kind of a battle, doing things and never listen to your body. I think one of the biggest things also for athletes in general is to rest a day. It's so nearly impossible to accept it.
Yeah. Interestingly, a friend of mine, Chrissy Wellington, the incredible multi-Ironman champion, I think she's 4 or 5 world champion, 4 times.
Yeah, she's part of 33 Shake.
She is. Yeah. But she told me, she gave me one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever had. I don't always listen to it, but I do have her voice sometimes in my head. Because one of the things she learned, the most valuable thing she learned, she told me through her career, was how important a rest day is.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was training for the Ironman 3 years ago, that's what she said to me. And it's such a struggle, I think, as you said, for all athletes, for all people that, want to strive for something and for a goal. It's like, where's the fine line between pushing and pushing and pushing? And, it's like, we should get up at 5 and train, and then we should go to work, and that's the only way we can achieve, and da-da-da. And it's like, I always find that school of thought slightly conflicting with the school of thought of how we're supposed to self-care and actually how important rest days is. And I think if we look at self-help or advice and these things that we see on Instagram and like how people have achieved, it's all about, you've got to give everything and you do have to get up at 5 a.m. and you've got to train this and you've got to train that and you've got to put the time in. And that was always my ethic. And then, but I've started to change that in a way, because I'm starting to recognize that actually, is that how we achieve things? And is that actually what makes us feel happy? Because then we'll achieve that, and then we'll constantly strive for the next thing where we push ourselves to the limit. But at the same time, like, I like doing that because I feel like I discover a lot about myself. So it's about, I think, finding that balance. And as Chrissy told me, that one of the most important things she learned was how active a rest day is, if that makes sense, and how it is actually doing something. And that's something I'm desperately trying to incorporate in my life, because it's my biggest downfall. That I find it very difficult to do that. But at the same time, it's also my positive, because it means sometimes that I can fit a lot into my life. So it's such a fine line. But that's one thing that I've really been like working through. And that's one of the reasons I think I had the tattoo on my leg, because I think some people when they go through trauma and they go through stuff, I think our tendency as human beings is to, we've been through that, let's suck it up and let's just push on and kind of ignore what it's done to us. And to me, I don't think you can go through anything like that and not be changed, and not have to look at it, and not have to analyze how you feel, and not have to be in touch with how you feel. Because I think the thing I've learned, and with working through a clinical psychologist, the way that mental health problems manifest and PTSD is when we don't actually look at how we feel and what's happened to us. And I think that's one thing that I've continually learning, and I'm not there yet, is, okay, how do I feel about that? How is that making me feel, and why, and what do I need? Like, what are my emotional needs right now? And because ultimately that's what's going to make me happy and be able to achieve everything that I want to achieve, rather than the kind of negative way of doing it where I'm having a go at myself all the time to do better and push myself and strive, and which is what I think I can get in a circle with. And I think a lot of athletes do as well. So instead of like looking at how amazing they've done, that they crossed the line, they look at what they didn't achieve. So, for example, they didn't get first, or they didn't get a personal best, or they didn't feel this way, or, you know, and I think we look at the negative rather than, oh my gosh, I just did that. That's awesome. So I think that's something, I think, you know, I did that when I was a young kid. Like, I've been doing it since I was a kid. I remember like if I used to win a race, like I wouldn't be happy with it because I could have done better, or I could have got a personal best, and because I didn't get a personal best, but I won the race. And it's like, where does it end really? But yeah, the tattoo is for me to face it, and to remind me of what I've gone through, and so I don't lose sight of it rather than ignoring it. Whereas I think some people think that it should be the other way around, where it's like, you know, well, the past is the past. And honestly, well, the most important thing I think I've learned in my journey so far is how important the past is, and how the past needs to be part of your present and your future, so that you can learn from it and understand what that past made you feel, rather than ignoring it. Because ignoring it it might mean that it's not in your head at that moment, but the emotion attached to it never goes away.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I would imagine another big thing that did change from your life from when did happen Rio. It was probably, listen to your body, and also the nutrition. I don't know if something has changed, because now you have to take care more about your body. You know better your body, and you know how important is health. I would imagine that you change something, your attitude toward that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had to follow a kidney. I was on a really strict kidney diet when I first came out of hospital, because the consultant really wanted my kidneys to work, basically. I know that sounds really obvious, but he wanted to try and push my body to work again, rather than maybe on dialysis and then going for a transplant. And he was amazing, because he really, he basically said the reason why my kidneys started to work again was because I was so physically fit and so healthy. And I think that's a testament to anybody out there, that I think, again, we, especially when you do more extreme like races, maybe, I think we have a tendency to either do it for goal setting, or then on the other hand, a lot of people do exercise for the way they look. And I think we forget that, hang on, we need to exercise anyway to be healthy, because the doctor said that, you know, if I'd have been unhealthy or would have been slightly overweight, then I would not have survived what I went through. And that's one of the reasons why my kidneys started to work. And he really pushed that, because he, I suppose, believed in my determination and also my body to regenerate and to recover. But with that, I definitely followed a really strict kidney diet, which is quite strange, because it's quite contrary to some of the things that we do. For example, like, I can't eat avocado and bananas because they're so high in potassium, which I would love before and eat all the time. So I had to relearn. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I haven't drank since that happened to me, so like 2.5 years now. And to be honest, I find it really empowering. And in a way, I'm like, oh, actually, that's quite nice. Like, I don't have that social pressure, because people know I can't drink for health reasons. And I think it made me realize how much alcohol plays such a negative role in a lot of our lives. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to drink and stuff, but I think, for me, I think it empowered rather than a negative thing. And but then I think the main thing that I've really changed is to look after myself nutritionally. So I think that I didn't probably fuel very well before, as in sometimes I would expect my body to go and do something when I've not eaten. And I think, again, that wasn't because I had a bad relationship with food and I was trying to limit my calorie intake. Anybody that knows me knows that I love food, and I feel like I have a good, healthy relationship with food. Not necessarily when I was younger, but I do now. But it was more that but in a way, maybe I could question that, because it was more going back to self-care, because I'd skip lunch to if I had back-to-back meetings. So I wouldn't go, I need to grab 10 minutes here to at least grab something. I'd just be like, oh, I'll just power on. And then expect my body to train at the end of it. And then I wouldn't recover very well, because then I probably wouldn't bother taking a recovery, anything, because I'd train and then I'd go to another event and I'd just like try and find something there. And I think because I used to be on the road a lot, I still a bit now, but not as much. And again, I just grab stuff and I wouldn't really prepare very well to make sure that I fuel my body. So that's something I've learned, because I really, really changed that. Like, I never, ever skip meals, you know, very, very rarely now. You know, even if I have to be on the go, even if I know that I can't eat for a while, I'll make sure I grab a snack. I won't just be like, oh, I'll just power through. And I make sure that after training, I really refuel myself, because the amount of times that I didn't do that, you know, it's just crazy to think why, because I didn't prioritize it. So now I'm like, yes, fuel is ridiculously important. And also I have a really low blood sugar. And to be fair, I did before Rio happened, but now it's just worse. And again, I never really looked after that. I just have crashes. And I'm also I'm not really a hangry person, but I'm definitely a person that gets really affected by food because of my low blood sugar. So if I don't eat food, I'm not angry, but I definitely can't concentrate. I can't hold a conversation. I'm like a little bit irritable. So, and again, I wouldn't listen to my body in that sense. And now I'm much better about consistent fueling. I'm much better about fueling on race day. I mean, like, my friends used to joke about me. I've got a friend who does a lot of Ironmans, and he'd be like, when he came and watched me did the 70.3, the half Ironman, he was like, you only drank one bottle. There was one bottle. Like, you're such an idiot. Like, why didn't you drink? And I was like, I don't know. I was just too busy concentrating on racing, you know. And so, and again, that was just my mentality. So that's definitely changed.
Now you're connecting more with your body and listening to it. But I have to say, listen to the body, and especially the nutrition, is so difficult. You realize the difference when you start to fuel yourself in the right way, in a natural way. You realize how your body responds in a completely different way.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I don't have like, when I fuel properly, I don't crash, which is really interesting, because I used to crash, and like, for those that do cycling, like, bonk quite a bit, and I'd be like, oh, and because I just didn't sustain the fuel. And I also burn a lot, and I think we forget as people that train how much we burn and how many calories we need. And I think that's sometimes contrary to what the mainstream media put out there about restricting calorie intake. But actually, when you're an active person, it's absolute nonsense. Like, if we think about, I know it sounds so basic, but you know, it's what fuels your body, and we all know that. But I think we forget that we're ultimately just an engine that's burning. And also the mental, we burn mentally as well. And I feel like I know for a fact that I can't concentrate, and I'm not as proactive or as efficient or reach my potential when I'm not fueling properly.
Yeah, so you notice quite a lot of the difference when you are fueling right. Big part that you were also saying is refueling afterwards. So which is your ideal nutrition pre-race, during race, and post as a recovery? Because of course you are restricted also with your diet because of your body, because of Rio.
Yeah, so I can't take whey protein or any man-made protein because my kidneys can't process it. And I have to be careful with too much sugars, which a lot of gels and nutrition during races have, because they just make me spike, and then my body just can't handle it. Also, my body doesn't flush very well anymore. It's still, you know, it's only 2 years since I came out of hospital, and 2.5 years since it happened to me. So my body's still in a recovery process. You know, they say it takes, you know, 3 or 4 years really for your my body's basically still building. So I have to be careful with that. And I think also, like, I'm so now I won't do anything that, I don't know, I won't put anything bad in my body. I mean, obviously I eat cake and stuff like that within reason, but I am quite protective over myself now, because like I know what my kidneys look like, and they're full of scar tissue, and there's like dead parts, and I know what, obviously I know how horrific it was, and I never want to put myself in a situation where I'm ever back in a hospital again if I can avoid it. So I want to look after myself the best way possible. So that's why, like, I don't want to sound like I'm promoting 33 Shake, but like I started using your products because they're natural, and the post shake is great for me, the post exercise shake, because it's completely natural and doesn't have any whey protein in it. So it just has natural proteins and a lot of vitamins and minerals. And I think that's another thing that I definitely was guilty of. I probably didn't get enough vitamins and minerals when I was racing or doing exercise in general. And then sometimes also I do it naturally without a product. I know your product's natural, but I remember when I ran 250 miles to 40 different football clubs for charity. That was about 5 years ago. And I just couldn't, nothing agreed with me. And this was before you guys were around. And so I ended up doing it all naturally. I had milk straight after and boiled eggs, completely natural proteins, and, calcium and vitamins and minerals. And and it just worked so well. And when I was running, I would have water with a little bit of salt in it. So I did it completely natural then, because my stomach was so upset. I just couldn't take it. So I'm one of these people that, and I'm sure a lot of athletes are out there, like, that just can't handle a lot of the man-made products and a lot of the high sugar products. Like, I always get, I seem to talk about diarrhea a lot. I always get diarrhea from them when I'm racing, when I did my Ironman. I think I went to the toilet during the marathon part of it probably about 10 times because I had diarrhea. I was sick, all the orange stuff out of my mouth. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. So yeah, I think that I prefer anything natural, because especially with what happened to me, it's made me even more conscious about what we put in our bodies. And it's actually, I think, for example, like I have butter in the fridge rather than margarine, because it's the margarine that's probably one of the worst foods we can eat in the world. That's got so much crap in it, but we use that because we think that butter's unhealthy. And then so I'm definitely go back to old school and try and avoid anything that's man-made, including sports nutrition.
I think you're doing the right thing, natural. Our body, it recognizes straight away what is good for you and what is not. So if you are vomiting orange foam, that you are not the only one having problem to go to the toilet, vomiting, or having cramps on stomach ache or things like that. It's unfortunately such a common thing that we see from so many. So I know that you are going to run the London Marathon.
Yeah.
So, and you are supporting the cause of end malaria.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the voice petition.
So I'm running for Malaria No More next weekend. For me, running the marathon next weekend, the London Marathon, isn't about running a time or anything. Like, I'm not in a position where I can do that, and nor do I want to, because I've ran a lot of marathons, and for me, running the marathon next weekend is just all about part of my recovery, and to show people, hopefully inspire people and show people that you can get over horrific adversities and, physical and mental illness, and, do things like run a marathon. So I don't care how fast I do it in, and it's about running for Malaria No More and raising awareness. And I suppose, like, I've spent quite a bit of time in Uganda last year, and met a lot of people who sadly have to live in malaria areas. I have malaria along with 3 other life-threatening diseases. It was a little bit more complicated than just malaria. But I don't have to live in a country that has malaria anymore. So for me, I'm running for every parent, I suppose, that's lost a child to malaria unnecessarily, because it is completely unnecessary. And I think that's the thing about malaria. It's entirely treatable and preventable. There just needs to be a sustained effort for us to end it, and we can be the generation that ends it. So it's the oldest disease in the world. It's killed half of the world, half of mankind. 50% of the world are at risk. It's the biggest killer of children under 5. A child dies every 2 minutes. Yet we kind of ignore it in the Western world because it doesn't directly affect us, but it actually does. And I think this is where, if people could understand a little bit more, that it does. Because, I mean, you know, I don't live in Africa and I don't live in a malaria country, but I nearly died from malaria. I know a lady who lost her son, who travelled to Africa, and he was only in his early 20s, and he died of malaria. But also it affects the whole economy and the community. And morally, I believe that as humans, that if we can do something about the fact that there's so many children dying, then we should absolutely. But also from an economical point of view, we can help lift like places like Africa out of repression due to helping them be healthy and not having to die from malaria. Because we talk about, we want equality in the world, we want education, but if we don't have health, if those children can't get to 5 years old because they're dying of malaria, which is entirely preventable and treatable, and actually it only costs like $1, it's so cheap as well, it's not like something that's ridiculously expensive, then how can we get equality? Because those girls are dying and aren't going to school to get educated, to create equality. And girls and boys aren't lifting themselves out of poverty because they don't get to go to school to get educated, because they're dying of malaria in the first place. Or they're having problems with malaria. I met a young girl who survived malaria, but then because of malaria had cerebral palsy, because malaria affects the brain. I had brain hemorrhaging from when I had it as well. But luckily, I was okay. But the doctors did think that I was going to be disabled. And I think it's so much bigger than we see. So using your voice, you asked about the power of the voice. I mean, I'm not Bill Gates, so I don't have the money to throw at malaria. So I'm like, what do I have? Well, I have an experience. I nearly died from malaria. I have an education and an understanding, and I also have an audience. So if I can help raise awareness and educate people on malaria, because it's also not always about putting loads of money in to find vaccines or to find new science. It's actually making sure that what we have gets to the people that need it. But when it does get to the people that need it, that they understand what they're supposed to do with it. So the thing I talk about isn't about malaria tablets or necessarily bed nets. It's about educating the people that do live in malaria areas that are most at risk, which is the villages I've spent time in Uganda in, educating them and helping them understand what malaria is, because you wouldn't believe that. And it's something that I didn't really realize, that when I was there's a real lack of understanding. Even though these people live with malaria, what malaria is, they accept it as something that they're either going to survive or not going to survive. But it's so sad that they accept it as part of their life, that they might die from it, rather than understanding that they can actually change it by understanding the symptoms and seeking treatment. Because a lot of them don't, because they think that they believe in like witch doctory, and that maybe they were possessed, so they don't go and seek the treatment that is there. So I think helping them understand that malaria isn't something that's still respecting their cultural values, but it isn't something that is given to them by a spirit. It's not a demon. It's actually a disease that can be prevented. So it's about educating them how to use a bed net as well, because in the Western world we call it a bed net. Well, half of these people don't have beds, so how can they understand how they're supposed to use a bed net? So it's the simple things that, to me, it's all about the last mile and educating the last mile and empowering them. Because I think, again, we have this perception, and it frustrates me how in the Western world, we're better than people that living in third world countries. And actually, when I learned so much from them, they're all about community. They don't have loneliness. They look after their elderly. It takes a child to raise a village. A village does raise their children. And they're survivors. They're most incredible survivors. We can learn so much from them, and they're empowered people. So if we can just help educate them, then they can help themselves. So I think that's what I try and use my voice for.
It's amazing. You're doing an amazing job because realistically, you're touching so many people, and your story is definitely incredible. But not just only powerful, but what you are doing really spread the voice. Education is what, for so many people, it will be actually saving a lot of life. I'm pretty sure about this because education spread fast, especially with people like you.
Yeah, and I think to me, when people say, "Oh, why?" It's that whole thing where we were talking about a minute ago about how. You go through these things. Should you just try and I went through that. I just want to leave it in the past and just get on with my life. But to me, I just couldn't do that. I don't think I could live with myself if I, got to an old age and realized that I never used my voice or used the experience I had to help other people. And to me, I think, selfishly, in a way, it helps me too, because it helps me think I went through that for a reason. And if it can help another family, or it can help save just one life, then, well, maybe I was meant to go through it for a reason, which is quite hard to take because, it was really horrible and it put my family through a lot of distress, and it was, like torture. Because I also remember being in the coma and I was told I was going to die before I went in. So I was like, and I was desperately fighting. But for me, if I can use that experience to change something else, then I feel like it's my duty to. In fact, it's my obligation to.
That's amazing, really amazing what you are doing, because realistically, you are seeing this bad adventures, call it like that, or don't know how to call it, but this life experience as an opportunity to spread the voice and to give this awareness and knowledge. So thanks so much for doing this, because it's really, it's very admirable. Not so many people that will be ready to do it, because you need also a lot of strength to bring it out. It brings us for sure a lot of emotion, and so it's not easy things to do. So thanks so much for this, because it's something that you're doing for this generation, next generation, and future generation. It's something that, it's amazing. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
So I thanks so much for sharing with us your incredible story and spread the message. And I hope you are going to have fun at the London Marathon.
Thank you.
It's amazing. It's incredible thinking about it. As you said, just only 2 years and a half ago, you were in difficulties at the hospital and things, and now you are able to run a marathon, and you call it a recovery time or something like that.
I think what I mean by I probably should qualify that is that for me, it's almost like this new life and this new body, because I didn't recognize my body when I came out of hospital, and I still don't. It doesn't feel like the body, or I don't feel like the same person that I was. But I'm not saying, I think I'm going to end up being better and bigger than I was, and I feel like, because I've really had to look at myself and improve myself. And I think what I mean by recovery time is I don't know where my boundaries are. I don't know where my limits are. So I'm still on a journey to try and discover where they are, because beforehand I knew almost, I knew what I could do. But now it's like, let's see see what I'm like doing a marathon. Let's see if I can do this, and let's see if I can do this, and because it's almost like this new journey of where are my boundaries now.
So it was such a pleasure to have you at the show. I'm so excited still now after this long conversation. So thanks so much for your time to share all your experience, and good luck with the London Marathon
Thank you.
in a few days.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thanks so much. I probably shouldn't have had a tattoo done just before the marathon.
Well, now you can show off,
Still
you know.
Sore, but yeah, at least I can show it off.
Exactly. Show it
Even
off.
though it's still really sore. But thank you very much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as I did while I was recording it. Sharing tools and making an all-natural sport nutrition is our mission. You can find us at 33shake.com. Thanks for joining in.